The heroine lies on the asphalt covered in blood, suffering greatly from internal wounds, regretting that she did not bring the stone earlier. Klein Redolofsko von Macarena, with sweet features and blonde hair, plays the role of the daughter transforming completely. Looking thoughtfully to the side, covering herself with a fan, she realizes that everything around is just a disguise. In a luxurious room decorated with carpets and chandeliers, Klein feels rich, although luxury does not bring joy. Standing in a beautiful dress, she looks lonely, thinking about the millions of thoughts that flash through her head. Klein's dissatisfaction is evident in the corset she had to wear while changing her appearance for the role. The glass slipper presses hard on your foot, rubbing your toes and reminding you that luxury requires sacrifice. Fleeing from the hall, Klein got used to leaving the maid confused. Away from the hall, she promises herself that this is the last time she will run away, determined not to succumb to the inconvenience anymore. The prince kisses the beauty's hand at the royal ball, but she only responds with a smile, knowing that this is the beginning of a new chapter in her life. The engagement was planned much earlier than the ball, so the ring sparkled on the finger, as if rejoicing at finally being in the long-awaited place. This was not the first time the prince had been in the count's castle. This place had become familiar to him, and even a little familiar. Each time, the young man was very happy to attend all sorts of events, not even knowing about Klein and her love. The red-haired beauty fell in love with the prince at first sight. And so, being in a crowd of people in the hall, the heroine, as usual, fans herself with her favorite fan and waits for the announcement. The implementation of the plan took 10 years. The prince is in the hall, also waiting for the moment when he will announce the upcoming events. His family had always been on the side of the royal family, and that is why everything suited him. Looking a little nervous, the young man holding the paper with the decree in his hands begins his speech. To be engaged. Clenching her hand into a fist with excitement and joy, the girl only thinks that everything has finally worked out. Her hand is in her pocket, which helps hide her emotions. Lady Klein accepts congratulations. Lots of comments are flying in about how good they look together. She can only remain silent, closing her eyes as a sign of gratitude. You can see the pretense on the faces of the people around her. They did not expect such a turn of events, or it is simple envy. No one knows. The girl stands in the crowd like a black crow. Everyone only looks at her. In her thoughts, the heroine is already singing her own praises because it was she who played the main role in the execution of this plan. She doesn't care about those around her. People whisper to each other. Everyone already knows what follows the event that happened today. At the end of the ball, the agreement will be approved. The red-haired girl is looking forward to the end of these 10 years of waiting. She had to pretend for so long, and finally it would all end. The decision to celebrate the last night comes immediately. Folding her fan, the heroine decides to move thoughts about how to reward herself today. Do not leave her. She doesn't know what will happen next, but she promises herself that no matter how it goes, she will give it her all. The next moment, the girl begins to look at everyone around her. Her attention is not focused on anyone in particular, but this is a lie. The ball has just started, and she has to choose someone to dance with. The hall is full of people. Everyone present can choose with whom to dance. There is an immensely large number of beautifully dressed young men and women. Dissatisfaction flashes across young Klein's face. She remembers that according to etiquette, the prince should be the first to invite her to dance. The guy is literally a few meters away from her, but she doesn't even want to get close to him. The blonde's face shows how cold-blooded he is. You can immediately tell that the young man is also not eager to approach the girl remaining in place and glaring at her. The lady faces a difficult choice. She must decide whether she should dance first with Count Macarena or the heir of some stately family. Klein Redolofsko von Macarena gracefully leaves the prince's company, deciding to push him to the very end of the ball and leaving him behind. It will be better for everyone. Stopped in thought, the girl does not know where to go. Someone unexpected catches her attention. Klein turns his head towards the stranger. There are no emotions on her face, but you can understand that she immediately understood who it was and why he was here. A stately, handsome, black-haired young man stands directly opposite our heroine. With his hands in his pockets, he continues to look at her intently, almost burning her with an indifferent gaze. A second of confusion, and both feel hidden anger. The girl recognizes none other than the Duke of Bockhold. She is not pleased with this meeting. Squeezing out a sweet smile, the lady begins to ask what he needs. Assuming whether he is lost, she advises him to go sit somewhere in the corner and not stand in the middle of the hall with nothing to do. The young man is truly extraordinarily handsome, but he is famous for more than just his appearance. Latian Freight. Jacques von Beckeld is the head of the only ducal family in the Pala Empire. He saved hundreds of nobles and heads, the imperial chambers. The duke looks at the girl with a gaze coming closer to be next to the girl. He wanted to say something, but stepped on the hem of his interlocutor's dress. Still unfazed, he tries to ignore her anger. The lady still forces herself to smile as if nothing had happened. He causes a lot of problems. In the past, he got in the way every time, and thereby prevented her from getting closer to the prince. It was because of this man that Count Macarena found it so difficult to carry out his plan. He always doesn't show it, but remains just as annoying to everyone. The beauty seemed to be in complete calm. Something clearly came to her mind, another thought that would help her. The prince does not understand what is happening. Standing calmly away from all events, he thought about different things, but his calmness ended. Klein moves across the hall towards the young man with confidence in his actions. The closer she gets, the more confusion appears on his face. It seems like this is the only couple here now. Curtsying and bowing her head, the girl with a sweet smile asks if the guy wants to ask her to dance. She insists. The prince's face turns pale. He clearly did not expect this. Beauty knows that the Duke of Beckeld is watching them, and that is why this reaction is not surprising to her. The determination has not evaporated anywhere, and now the young couple is already holding hands on the eve of the dance. Klein experiences incredible feelings because she really likes to mock people of the upper class. These two look very harmonious. The young man carefully holds the girl by the waist, and she in turn places her hands on his shoulders. Everything is fine, but the prince is definitely not enjoying what is happening. The dark-haired duke watches from the other end of the hall with a hint of envy or disappointment. He expected a completely different outcome, and did not at all expect that the red-haired woman would have the courage and spirit to do this. Whirling in the dance in complete silence, the prince suddenly begins a story about how nothing will happen to the girl with him, and she will suffer if she marries him. The main character presses her face to his shoulder. She doesn't like his words at all. She is not happy with the fact that he will never love her. She believes that their lives will have both love and meaning. But the young man thinks differently. Literally every cell of her body does not want to believe the words spoken. It's very painful to hear all this from him. If he was lucky enough to be born a prince, this does not mean that he is already good in life. This is considered a threat to one's own fiancé, and is difficult to dare. Having collected her thoughts, the heroine smiles, pretending that nothing happened, and talking about how everything is good and normal. The young man, not expecting to hear such an answer, was even confused at first. He asks if she is against this arrangement, expecting to hear a refusal. The young girl just nods in response, saying that everything is fine. She looks happy, but it's hard to stay okay with this situation. Noticing that this is none of her business, everything becomes clear. It's deep night outside. All the inhabitants have gone to bed and the castle is empty. The door to the street opens quietly. In complete silence, Klein thinks about how glad she is that the ball is finally over, and she can transform into her other self. The girl's cloak flutters in the wind. She is standing on the terrace. The blonde is free from the role, and now it's time to radically change everything in her favor. Somewhere behind Klein, suspicious rustling sounds were heard. Not expecting this, and clearly frightened, the lady does not even have time to properly react to defend herself. The hood falls off with a sharp jerk to the side. Someone's strong hand clasps her wrist. Surely after this she will have a bruise and many other physical problems. Genuine horror emerges on the face of the fair-haired heroine. It seems that she is ready to scream from helplessness. A strange sound comes from her throat. The lady is lying on the cold tile. She's covered in blood. The only thing she feels is severe pain. She doesn't want to die. But the thought that this will happen flashes through her head. The nobles couldn't let her escape. A tall man with a cold-blooded expression, none other than Count Macarena. He couldn't let her leave alive. She was just a pawn who was raised as a villain to be feared. Trying to cope with unbearable pain, the heroine opens her mouth, which contains something she had to put her fingers inside to remove the object which caused even more pain. A small, inconspicuous glass bottle. It is not the packaging that is important, but the filling itself, because inside there is a purple potion that plays a huge role. The young heroine prepared this remedy as her last chance. When you open the lid, time turns back. The magical remedy will help her escape, go back, and live happily without any problems. She doesn't have another output. How to use jar. Klain attended wizard events quite often. Everyone always laughed at their theories, but not our heroine. She pretended not to believe all this, but secretly helped in the research. Now, lying on the asphalt and looking at the bottle, she does not regret what she did one bit. Everything is exactly as it should be, but everything she received is not enough for one sip. Realizing that she had no time left and deciding to take action, Klain finally raised the jar to her lips and drank the potion. Not the most pleasant taste. Tears flowed from the eyes of the blonde beauty, either because of pain or because of unpleasant sensations. A nervous laugh of victory escaped from the main character's chest. Smiling, she only thought about how everything would be fine when she went back in time, covering her mouth with her hand. Black, all-consuming darkness. The girl is still lying on the concrete floor. She promises herself that she will definitely survive at any cost. The table is full of dirty dishes and leftovers. It seems that this is simply an immeasurable amount. All this is clearly not on the street, and it is difficult to understand what is what. A dark blonde woman stands right next to the kitchen furniture. Holding 2 pints of beer that appear to be empty, she calls Karuna for help with the cleaning. The blonde girl holding plates in her hands agrees because she is obliged to help Mistress Jessie. Everything is going great, but she didn't expect to go back so far into the past. Trying to hold on to a stack of plates, Karuna rushes across the hall. There are a lot of worries today, and she only hopes that she will have time to complete all the tasks. Walking past one of the tables, a man in a blue shirt called out to a girl. He didn't say her name, but she knew for sure that he was addressing her. The heroine only had time to turn around when she saw an outstretched piece of bun. The young man cannot understand why she is not growing up, and jokingly says that he doubts that she is fed there at all. The girl without hesitation digs into the offered food. She's clearly hungry, and that is why she never refuses anything. The girl is not starving. The boss always gives a lot of rice for serving people. The young people only smile in response, listening carefully when the boss again screams because Karuna ate the food. Just about to leave, the beauty invites her friends to visit this place more often. She will be very pleased, and this may help. Darkness fell on the earth, as if trying to absorb everything around the beautiful sunset, sparkles with pink tones as a harbinger. The standing house is getting ready for bed. Stretching and stretching her arms, Karuna complains to herself about how tired she is. She had done a lot of work today, and knew very well that by evening she would not feel very well. Stretching and stretching her arms, Karuna complains to herself about how tired she is. She had done a lot of work today, and knew very well that by evening she would not feel very well. The next moment, the girl falls onto the bed with relief. By doing this, every time it was as if she was letting go of the day and enjoying it. Looking a little sad, the main character thinks about everything that happened. Such thoughts overtake her every evening, and yet 5 months have passed since that incident. The girl survived. Opening her eyes, her surprise knew no bounds because even with hope she was not sure of anything at all. Rising from the ground and brushing off her cloak, her first thought was that she had survived. It was impossible to say that she was not incredibly happy about this. Memories from last night in that alley immediately come to mind. Looking down at her clothes, Karuna noticed the same bloody stains, but the wounds had disappeared. Lifting the hem of her dress, she quickly catches herself. You can't stand still, otherwise they might come for her body and then she'll definitely be finished. There was a puddle underfoot, a beautiful shade of blue and so transparent it looked like a mirror. Without immediately noticing, the girl stepped right into it, and she was drawn to look into it. Her reflection looked at the heroine, beautiful sweet girl with short hair. Her expression was frozen in incomprehension. Quickly jumping back, the girl began to ask herself questions in deep surprise. She really didn't understand who it was or where it came from. Be that as it may, the heroine got used to her new self quite quickly. Cupping her face in her hands, the girl continued to look at her reflection in admiration. The bottle with the potion was to blame. Now, she did not contain any value, but when she needed help, this potion actually returned her 8 years ago, thereby saving the young lady. By all calculations, this should now be the year 481 of the imperial calendar. The streets look exactly the same as they did recently, which is quite strange, but nothing has changed. Back then, she was still Klain, a red-haired beauty always dressed in cute outfits. There was only one drawback. Her appearance did not match her soul. She always wanted to go out and show herself as a real villain. Perhaps no one had yet realized that she had escaped from the castle, but there was a certainty that as soon as the maids realized her, everything would be bad. There were many emotions displayed on their faces. One of them was fear. Thoughts about Count Macarena came into my head. The girl was sure that he would certainly try to find her. Deciding to move the heroine was still haunted by terrible thoughts. But there was only one way to escape from his clutches. The castle looks exactly the same as always. Years pass, nothing changes. That is why even now, having returned 8 years ago, the lady does not notice anything. Karuna is handed a warm sandwich with greens and meat. Looks incredibly delicious. The man notes that she must be hungry, and this is the honest truth. The girl looks a little lost and helpless. Having accepted the food, she only quietly says words of gratitude and begins to eat. Being here, it's hard for a lady not to remember the prince. He's probably the same as he was, constantly whines for no reason, not allowing others to breathe peacefully. She was pulled out of her own thoughts by the atmosphere around her. Everyone around looked rather sad, and the girl could not understand why. I didn't want to bother myself with mental activity, which is why the heroine turned to a passing girl. She really wanted to know what happened. The blonde did not hesitate to answer, and told that the prince himself had been cruelly deceived yesterday. Only opening her mouth in surprise, she continued to ask how it happened. While she looked worried on the outside in her head, she mocked his ability to get into trouble since childhood. She definitely did not expect such a truth. The prince was deceived by Count Macarena's daughter, who ran away right before the engagement without saying anything. The girl's face froze in confusion. With her head down, the main character tried to put together the pieces of the puzzle, while her interlocutor silently looked at her, frozen in a silent question. What's wrong? Karuna couldn't believe that the potion simply rejuvenated her without turning back time. The blonde seemed ready to cry again, but then a guy passing by noticed them and stopped. A handsome young man with lavender hair tried to find out what happened. Nobody understood what happened. The girl only told about the story and that Karuna should be shocked by this. The heroine's eyes widened. She continued to think about everything that had happened. This cannot be. This is all definitely some kind of cruel joke or accident. Noticing the sadness in Karuna's eyes, the young man squatted down, calming her down, saying that there was nothing to be afraid of, and the evil bride was punished and would not be able to return in the near future. A tear rolled down the main character's face. The prince will definitely have time to call off the engagement by the time she returns. The lady could only express her condolences. If the prince still had to marry Klein, then he would really have a bad time. It is impossible to imagine what he is experiencing now. My head is filled with unnecessary memories of when they stood next to each other after the dance. The girl decided to stop thinking about anything. What happened happened. She can't change anything. She was simply left with no choice. Now, she has 1 more month to work. The ceiling caught her attention. Ordinary wooden boards that I wanted to look at out of simple despair. The goal was to wait for new documents and leave the capital as quickly as possible. Karuna really needed money. She found this job and continually saved from her salary to fulfill her goal. The girl managed to get a sufficient amount of money, but all to no avail. All her money was stolen during the assassination attempt, which was not expected. It's unpleasant to remember something like that. Always evokes sadness and thoughtfulness. Being in a hopeless situation, it seems that there is nowhere else to go. Once again, she decided not to think about it. At least, not now. Wrapping her arms around herself, Karuna promised herself to focus on surviving. This was the most important thing. You can find advantages in everything. The heroine did not die and even remained in the present, although she looked 8 years younger. She should keep moving forward. The morning turned out to be beautiful, except for the fact that Karuna did not get enough sleep. Walking down the stairs, she greeted her aunt and uncle. Already knowing that they were heading to church, the question burst out by itself. The nice couple answered the question with a smile and said goodbye, notifying the girl that breakfast was already waiting for her in the kitchen. Left completely alone and waving goodbye, the beauty remembered her work. She will have to go to work very soon. The walls of the cafe shook with screams. Karuna protested as best she could, already knowing that the offer was one of the worst for her. The boss, bowing his head in surprise, calmly asked, "Why doesn't the girl want to visit the Duke of Bakeld's estate while she has such a chance?" It was suspicious. At the Duke's estate, it almost always seemed like people wanted to literally destroy you with their gaze. The cold tendrils of fear never let go of the girl, even surrounded by friends. She didn't want to end up in a cage with hungry lions. The girl's usually calm face was distorted by obvious rage. The Emperor dreams of getting to her, but that was not the case. She didn't want to be destroyed. The elderly man, bowing his head a little disapprovingly, said that she was still not that smart beyond her years. He was wrong, and now everything is clear. The refusal was the last straw. It seemed that the boss's favorite pastime was inciting a young girl. She is not scared at all, but the man thought otherwise, trying to get her to agree. His remarks make your heart turn cold. Jerking to the side, Karuna screamed again. What did he think he was after all? This is all not true, trying to remain calm. It even seemed to her that she was almost succeeding, but the goosebumps betrayed the whole truth. The unpleasant conversation had sufficiently frayed the girl's nerves. Heading out, she decided that she would take today off. Otherwise, everything would only get worse. Already on the way out, she was caught up with the boss's words about double payment. It was as if he knew how much she needed money and manipulated it. A second later, standing near the counter, she actively nodded her head, agreeing to go anywhere. She just needs directions. She is ready for anything. The carriage drove along the city paving stones. The wheels made loud noises and tried to jump out. An unpleasant sound spread throughout the area, disturbing people around. Karuna was deep in her thoughts. It was really scary. At her own peril and risk, she agreed to this trip. The only thing that calmed her down was the fact that she looked younger, and probably no one would recognize her. Today there is double payment, and this is the most joyful news, much more important than her fears or the threat of her identity being revealed. The girl only cared about money. The chariot moved closer and closer to the castle gates. It was hard not to notice the horses in harness when there were just identical houses around. The young man waiting to arrive finally breathed a sigh of relief. The girl was about to open her mouth, but froze in a silent question. She was ahead of her by a young man who disappeared from her field of vision, asking her to wait. Soon people would arrive to carry the load. Karuna decided not to sit and wait in one place, but to immediately descend to the ground. It was not difficult for her to jump from the seat. Light leather boots softened the jump, and now the heroine is already standing firmly on the surface. It was the right decision to come here, and the girl does not regret anything. Turning incorrectly, the heroine hit her shoulder on the corner of the chariot. The pain was reflected on her face, and she automatically put her hand to the bruised area. The girl accidentally noticed that her hairpin was missing, which most likely fell as a result of her clumsiness. Before she could start to panic, the blonde beauty's attention seemed to be riveted to the ground. Her jewelry lay right under the wheels of the vehicle. The pain was almost no longer felt, and that is why Karuna decided to bend down and try to get the ill-fated hairpin. Sitting on her haunches, she was about to put the attempts into action, but suddenly she felt danger on her back. The eyes widened in fear. Slowly raising her head, the beauty froze. It seemed as if her whole body had instantly turned into a piece of ice. Excitement prevailed and crowded out all sensible thoughts. Right in front of the girl stood a wolf of incredibly huge size. He was clearly larger than the chariot, and even more so than Karuna herself. The red eyes sparkled with an evil fire, not foreshadowing anything good, but where could such an animal come from in the capital? The main character involuntarily fell to the ground. She didn't know what to expect. The beast continued to look at one point without taking his eyes off. Bakeld has definitely lost his mind if he keeps such a monster in his castle. Raising her head and continuing to look at the wolf, Karuna tried to calm down. The belief that she could not die from such an animal did not help at all. After the Count's assassination attempt, the girl simply cannot die under such ridiculous circumstances. She is strong and can handle anything. There is no other way out but to continue existing. Black massive claws sparkled in the sun, calling to think about the end of life. Seeing this in front of you, It's quite difficult not to cry from hopelessness. Thoughts about the worst were creeping up more and more from all sides. Even if the wolf simply steps on the girl, she will be finished. At first glance, it seems that it is heavier than anything in this world. Any conclusions immediately evaporated as soon as the animal raised its paw. The beast wanted to take a step forward or backward, but it seemed that this was being done in order to crush the poor girl. The next second, Karuna screamed in a voice that was not her own in an attempt to scare the animal away. She didn't want to die because she still didn't have time to do so much. Covering her face with her hands in a protective gesture, the girl pulled her legs closer to her chest. It seemed like an eternity passed, but nothing happened. This could not but cause confusion. Has she already died, or did they just decide to leave her for later? Opening her eyes slightly, the girl was convinced that she was still alive, but there were only more questions in her head. The beast looked sad. It seemed that their roles had changed, and all the fear passed to him. His ears flat against his head, his diamond eyes stared at the floor. He wouldn't stop just like that, so there was a reason for it. All you have to do is turn your head, and the girl notices something behind her. Right in her hand, she sees a knife out of the corner of her eye. Sharp and certainly effective. Karuna looks into the distance. A pile of barrels tied with ropes catches her attention. It's for safety's sake, and it will help her a lot. It is clear that the barrels are kept on their word of honor. Even a light wind calmly sways them in the breeze. This will be beneficial and help the cause. You need to think about exactly how to throw the knife. The main character decides to take action. Grasping the handle of the knife with her hand, she knows exactly what she needs to do and in what sequence. There is absolutely no time. We need to act faster. The next second, the weapon quickly flies towards the construction and cuts one of the ropes, which was the most important in this construction. A victorious smile appears on the girl's face with a degree of relief. The mission is accomplished, so she just thinks how easy it was. Lady is the best villain of the Empire. The task was very simple. The barrels begin to fall one after another as if in slow motion. Quite a pleasant sight for a girl. The wolf's mouth opens and he begins to howl. Nothing has happened yet, but the animal sees everything that is happening and understands everything perfectly. Many heavy barrels fly straight towards the predator. Trying to hide his fear, the animal only looks at them, unable to do anything. Karuna can finally breathe easy. Baring her teeth angrily, she triumphs. The worst is over now. The most important thing is escape. There is an urgent need to move, but the girl catches herself thinking that she cannot do this. Sharp sounds attract the lady's attention. The cries for help were not at all what she expected to hear. The human voice seems very familiar. A few seconds later, someone's head appears somewhere from under the barrels. Blue hair sparkles in the sun, making it easy to recognize its owner. A few seconds later, someone's head appears somewhere from under the barrels. Blue hair sparkles in the sun, making it easy to recognize its owner. Quickly turning around but unable to get up, the girl crawls to the side. Now it is she who makes the cries for help. She's scared, very scared. It's difficult to come to terms with this situation. Pressing her hands to her head and catching herself thinking that this is the end, the heroine still screams as if warning that you should not approach her. The barrels move, and a shabby young man appears from under them. With a hand to his head, he looks exhausted from the incident. Not believing her eyes, the young lady removes her hands from her face and asks questions. This is not a wolf, and this significantly relaxes the mind. Duke of Buckled. It was none other than him. The relaxation passed quickly. The young man, as if nothing had happened, straightens his hair and looks to the side in embarrassment. The girl's consciousness throws up a picture of the guy from their last meeting. Without believing anything, it is difficult to understand what is happening. This cannot be the same person as at the ball. You just have to look closely, and you will notice that he is different from his usual one. The heroine is unable to determine exactly what is wrong, but these are minor things. Karuna notices how different he is from himself. It's like an abandoned puppy or a wolf cub in the cold. It's hard for her not to admit that he looks cute. Without thinking for a long time, the Duke approaches the girl. Their faces are only 10 centimeters away. The moment seems very romantic. The girl quickly recoiled with wild squeals. Sinking further onto the asphalt, she wondered how spontaneous this step was. The young man carefully tucked the young lady's hair behind her ear. This gesture was filled with warmth, just like his words. He talked about how long he had been looking for her and finally found her. Without removing his hand from where it rested, Betrothed asked questions about whether she knew him. The answer was very strange for him, but Karuna could only mumble something quietly. All the words flew out of my head at once. Realizing that he already understood who she was, the beauty decided that she urgently needed to figure out how to get out of the situation. She was still chilled with fear, but there was no time to think. The thought that in exchange for information about Count Macarena she might be given protection flashed through her quickly, like an arrow. It's definitely worth taking advantage of. Jerking her head to the side, thereby throwing off someone else's hand, Lady Karuna stared at her interlocutor with hostility. She won't have to die again. She must survive. The Duke continues to glare at her. What does he want from the poor girl? It is impossible to read anything at all in his eyes. He remains as cold as ever. In a split second, his face changed. The stony expression disappeared somewhere, and a sweet smile took its place. Shyly looking at her, the young man only says how glad he is that he has finally met the girl, because she is his betrothed. Covering her mouth with her hands, Karuna again screams in protest. She is definitely not his betrothed, and she doesn't know anyone like that. Everything seemed unreal because this simply could not happen to her. Betrothed, closing his eyes elegantly, kisses the beauty's hand. The girl is so surprised that she cannot utter a word. Only thoughts flash through his head about whether he is okay or has lost his mind. This can't be true. It's all madness covered in lies. The eyes seem to open up even more on their own. Tearing himself away from Milady's hand, the dark-haired man freezes silently. He clearly has no intention of moving away or taking any action. Without thinking twice, the guy closing his eyes again bowed his head as a sign of recognition and respect. Karuna continued to stare at him, no longer trying to escape. Sharply hugging the girl, the Duke threw her to the ground, crushing her with his weight. He was quite comfortable and liked his position, but the girl just screamed again. Burying himself in the blonde's pleasantly smelling hair, Betrothed stopped moving. He did not react to the cries about how hard it was for the girl. The next minute the man fell on his side, still not letting go of the main character and making strange sounds. He seemed to be falling asleep, so Karuna did not understand anything. Strange actions put her into a stupor. Attempts to stick her hand in to throw him off did not end well, no matter how much the girl wanted it. Already out loud, she was annoyed and said that he had become attached to her for no reason. From the outside, it all looked quite strange. Waving her legs and arms in the air in attempts to free herself, the beauty became more and more desperate. All hope was lost. Karuna fell silent and stared mindlessly at the sky. The girl really didn't understand what had happened and what she should do now. Out of nowhere, someone's head appeared before my eyes. A handsome boy with hair the color of spring leaves smiled, greeting his interlocutor at the same time. Is this really the Forest Clan? The clan originates from the primordial forest. This place belongs to absolutely no one and is located where the Pala Empire is located. All people from the clan look like magical forest fairies of extraordinary beauty. Karuna emerged from her thoughts herself. She really wanted to know how Duke was connected to the clan. One of the girls who discovered the young lady as if nothing had happened looked somewhere to the side, not paying attention to the beauty's complete immersion in her thoughts. The blonde calls out to the guy asking for help, calling Betrothed a pervert. She insists that she be released. She has been wanting to get out from under him for a long time, but everything is going completely wrong. The green-haired man screams in surprise. He can't be a pervert. All he can do is come to the rescue. Continuing to look at the other person, Karuna continues to remain quiet, not saying a word. The handsome man says that help will arrive now. You just have to wait a little. The completely free main character turns over and crawls to the side, breathing heavily. She is surprised that she was released before the moment she suffocated. Clan men surrounded Betrothed. She noticed them immediately because of their red cloaks and colorful hairstyles. They all seemed to be confused. Perhaps the clan is asking the same question as the heroine. Did he fight the wolf? Karuna, tucking her knees under her, continues to watch what is happening. 3 people lift Duke, throwing his arms over their shoulders. The girl wanted to get up, but her thoughts consumed her again. The question was, where did the wolf go after all? Taking her green eyes to the side, the girl still doesn't understand everything that's happening. The wolf couldn't just disappear, but every minute this version was becoming less crazy. Emerging from her thoughts and returning to the real world, the main character remembers another unfulfilled task. A hand reaches out to the cloak of one of the clan men and gently pulls at the scarlet fabric. The girl really needs to sign for the delivery. This is what she came here for, the original purpose. Asking about the possibility of fulfilling her intentions, she only receives a kind smile in response, which silently shows agreement. Rejoicing at this situation, the young lady finally feels relieved. It's high time to finish this work and go home. After a while, everyone is in the castle. Karuna had to wait for some time before the man who was the first to notice her arrived, apologizing for being late. The unpleasant news literally stunned the girl. She could not be allowed to leave these chambers. Asking what they needed from her, the girl involuntarily noticed how the young man's face was distorted by a grimace of feigned surprise. The remark that the nobleman's order was carried out without further questions made the young lady wrinkle her eyebrows. All the sweetness disappeared, and it became clear to her how they really treated her. Apparently, the forest clan man was not too knowledgeable about life outside the forest. This meant only one thing: there was a chance to escape. The eyes lit up in anticipation of victory. Lies flowed in a continuous stream from the girl's mouth. She was not under the protection of the prince himself. Her entourage would not have noticed her disappearance, and the duke would not have any problems for keeping some girl in his chambers. None of this is true, but this is what she had to say. Already anticipating victory and escape from this terrible place, an ugly smile appeared on the heroine's face, which was difficult to notice, but it was quite real. She continued the intimidation. No one wanted Bakeld's reputation to be damaged. The pretense stretched out in a light trail. This time, the green-haired young man comes into play, agreeing with everything. It was clear that this was pure sarcasm. The girl, almost on her knees, folds her hands in a gesture of petition, claiming that she did not see or hear anything miss absolute innocence. The most hateful remark came out of the interlocutor's mouth. No one was going to let her go. She saw Ra'an's transformation, and it could not be erased from her memory. Sitting on the sofa, Karuna in amazement asks what it is. The answer to her silent questions, which she never had time to ask, is only the bitter truth. It seems that she is Bakelda's betrothed. Remembering the man's beauty and how cold he is, the girl's hair stands on end. How did it happen that she became the duke's betrothed, and what should be done to escape from here? There is deadly silence in one of the castle halls. Only two living souls who are unable to understand each other. The girl interrupts the peace by starting to tell her guesses. Fatigue is visible in the young lady's eyes. Everything that happened today clearly affected her. It's not even news anymore that people from the clan can be reincarnated and fall in love only once in their entire lives. The man remains silent. In response, he only gives the girl a smile. Ideas that beg for their own arguments continue to fill the entire space. The duke must be from the clan. Once a member of the forest finds true love, he experiences incredible happiness, 100% sure that Ron will appreciate every day with his beloved. The young man wanted to tell some more details about this, but stopped short. He couldn't be sure because, according to him, he had never experienced anything like this before, so he couldn't say for sure. The story continues, and it turns out that Ron has suffered since childhood in search of his betrothed. The only outlet was a visit to the imperial palace. Karuna's eyes widened sharply. It seemed that horror again dominated all her emotions. My head, as luck would have it, brought up the necessary memories. Just for this occasion, the Duke was indeed present at every ball. And now the puzzle is complete. This was the reason why he stuck there for days on end. You could never tell from him that he was even a little enjoying what was happening. While in the castle, he constantly stared angrily at everyone without showing it. The memories were cut off like a thin thread. The young lady still could not understand how this happened. Was he really just looking for his betrothed and didn't come there to mock her? The man put his hand to his cheek, evoking sympathy. His story went into a different direction, which Karuna did not even know about. Ron's condition has deteriorated in the last 5 months. He was unable to turn back into a human and remained that way for a month. The girl was already thinking that the guy would cry, but he suddenly opened his eyes and began to smile. It must not be so bad now. With a hint of kindness, the young man asked another question. He wondered why the young villainess had not escaped through the passages behind. It would make sense, but the girl didn't even think about it. And now the moment of self-pity has come. Wrinkling her nose, the girl realized the bitterness of the situation out loud. She will have to marry the Duke if this is all true, and she is his betrothed. If she didn't do this, she wouldn't just get out of here. This is already an obligation and cannot be avoided. It hung over her like a black cloud. Karuna continues to vehemently deny what is happening in her own head. She is not his betrothed. Otherwise, she would have known about it for 5 years already. Surely this is Klein, because at balls the Duke always saw only the red-haired beauty. The nice guy from the clan continues to smile silently. As much as she wanted to run away, the problem is that this guy told her all the secrets of Backhold. Looking at the door as if it were an impossible dream, the girl lamented. She didn't understand why the forest native did this. The main character, with her head down and her eyes downcast, was almost ready to cry. Unexpectedly, the young man suggested that she take a break for a while. A smile stretched across his handsome face. Everything was wonderful, and it was immediately clear that this arrangement suited the green-headed man. Walking away from the hall, Karuna decided not to waste a minute and began screaming again, trying to blame everyone and everything. She was being pushed into a rash act, but no one cared. Out of sight and hearing, the young lady of the clan noticed what a smart child she was. She shouldn't have been left alone, and that's what the man told his subordinates. Listening carefully and heeding the words of the leader, the rest of those present agreed with everything. It was clearly better for them not to stand in a crowd around her, so the best solution was to spread out around the area. The door to the chambers slowly opens. The lights are dimmed, making it clear that no guests were expected today. A hoarse voice asks who came and why. The Duke, sitting in bed, put his hand to his head, trying to escape from the sharp light and unwanted noise. Looking up, he saw his friend. The hand reaches out to the scarlet curtains, and the next moment the sun pours into the room. Ron makes an animal sound. What did he do to deserve this? Turning his head, the young man only asks about his well-being. This is the most important thing now, because after such a long time he has finally returned. Trying to open his scarlet eyes, Backhold slowly removes his hands from his face. He really doesn't feel as bad as he used to. My health has improved. The green-haired man hurriedly offered a glass of water to his interlocutor. Water definitely should have helped cope with the confusion and thirst. It seemed that everything was returning to normal, but the Duke did not remember at all how he turned into a human. Taking a sip of water and looking up, he thought about everything that was happening. It was not clear when he finally lost control. This remark was not a question, but he really wanted to know. Being in this state, Ron is clearly not helping either himself or those around him. Deciding to relax a little, he continues to say that he only remembers how, in my opinion, he found his betrothed. Having made some fuss, the Forest clan agrees and nods in response, assuring that she is an extremely nice person. It sounds convincing if not for the next sentence. The girl is only 12 years old. Water stuck in my lungs. Choking, the Duke begins to cough continuously, not believing his ears. Everything seems unreal, but the green-haired young man simply continues to smile sweetly, making it clear that he is not lying. Dilated pupils run first in one direction and then in the other. Words of disbelief escape the lips of the young guy. At the moment, there is only an enveloping feeling of horror and confusion. Asking if she is really 12 years old, Ron feels cold sweat. He no longer tries to deny, but bowing his head only thinks about what he should do. The girl is not 22, not 32, or even 42. It seemed that the man was already agreeing to even a lady of advanced years. Emerging from his consciousness, which he definitely managed to fray, Backhold only begins his questions again for the 100th time. He couldn't do it. This is all nonsense. Shrugging their shoulders, the Forest clan does not give a normal answer. Turning sharply to the door, the interlocutor offers to look at his betrothed. The green-haired young man understood that enough time had passed and they should visit her. The dark-haired one, in turn, clearly wasn't going anywhere. Without even moving from his spot, he continued to glare at the opposite wall. However, as if hurrying him up, the native calls him again. Turning his head away, the boy agrees. There is obvious hostility in his words, although he has not even seen the girl in person yet. Dressed in a handsome black suit, the Duke silently marches behind the Forest clan. He could have said nothing at all, but approaching the door, he suddenly sharply expressed a desire to enter first. Narrowed eyes, clenched shoulders. A shaking hand made it clear that the nervousness had not gone away. In his head, the young man still couldn't believe everything that was happening. His hand wrapped around the handle of the ornate door. My thoughts kept running, not having time to hold out even for a minute. The main character heard some sounds. Instantly raising her head, she tried to understand what would happen now. The beauty holding a mug of tea in her hands widened her green eyes. She was really afraid, but at the same time she understood that everything would be fine. Confusion showed on the young Duke's face. He remained completely silent, but even without words you could see all his emotions. The first impression of the girl put him in a stupor. He said that she really was a child, thereby showing his dissatisfaction. Taken aback by such impudence, Karuna was only silently angry. The greeting was not very welcoming. There was a certain rudeness. The next second, the girl put on a sweet smile. She couldn't pass up the opportunity to tease the guy, so she greeted him, hinting at his inclinations. It seemed as if the air in the room was electrified. The two heroes glared at each other angrily. They clearly deserve each other. Beautiful sofas softened the atmosphere. The young villainess continued to silently look at her interlocutor, as if not paying attention to the third member of the group. The young man tried very hard to diffuse the conversation, but so far he had little success. Karuna was not stupid. She always knew how to take advantage of anything that moved and absolutely any situation. Having decided that since she cannot avoid imprisonment, she should take advantage of it. The castle was safe. The girl wasn't sure, but maybe that was the case. Reluctantly, the house was subordinated to the prince in comparison. Determination flowed over the edge. The warlike look made it clear that the villainess was up to something. She will always have time to find a way to escape. You just need to wait until their grip weakens. This will clearly benefit her. The lady wanted to continue to immerse herself further in her thoughts, but she was interrupted. The Forest clan made its presence known. Quickly. Grouping herself, the girl, folding her arms militantly, agreed to live in the castle. Delighted, the chief praised Karuna's choice while turning his head towards the Duke to ask his opinion. He was sure that Bakald liked the beauty. The guy listened carefully to his feelings. The worst thing was that he did not understand anything and did not experience any attraction. Confusion was visible on the interlocutor's face. It was very strange. Literally today everything was fine and now everything has changed. They had no choice. The girl listened carefully to the conversation. The words that everything did not go as expected brought her back to earth. It looks like she's not his betrothed after all. Deciding to change the topic, she began to ask what she was allowed to do. This was a truly important detail, and the leader was in full agreement with it. There were a lot of offers. The guy realized long ago that the lady was familiar with the teachings of the church, which is why, smiling, he offered to serve in the Order of the Temple Knights. The words she heard struck the girl. Clearly not expecting this, she dropped the food she had been diligently eating. Karuna asked again, not believing her ears. The shock completely took over her. This job seemed like a dream. The Duke reminded of his presence with another nasty statement. He didn't like the girl's hands, and talked about how difficult it would be for her to wield a sword. Bakeld's remarks embarrassed the leader a little, but at the same time he tried to find any excuses. Raising his arms, he addressed himself either to his interlocutors or to himself. If you prescribe proper nutrition, the girl can grow up and get stronger. Mixed thoughts swarmed in my head. One was worse than the other, but the girl only continued to remain silent. The proposal was very interesting. Stay safe and also become a temple knight. Once she gets older, things will get much better. It seemed as if the answer was about to come out. Thoughtfulness saved the situation, but how she wanted to know more details. Having decided to take at least some action, the girl exhaled and declared her protest. She did not agree to this arrangement. Not expecting to hear a refusal, the native of the Forest clan only quietly asked if she was sure. A slight shock lit up his face. It was worth considering the words spoken. It would not be difficult for the girl to escape from here if she agreed. Leaning back on the sofa, the lady's face was distorted in a pained grimace. The interlocutors only silently asked questions, not understanding what the problem was. She can't trust these two people. It is written right on their faces what they will do with her. The villainess could not imagine herself alongside the Knights of the Crown, who were one of the 3 pillars of the empire. Thoughts focused only on the red cloaks. How lucky they all are to be under the command of the Duke of Bakeld himself. The news would literally explode if everyone knew that a commoner would be among the guards. The girl did not suit her at all, either in appearance or status. She would have been recognized immediately because of the heaps of attention. Tears were almost rolling from the young girl's eyes. She couldn't believe what she was saying, but she herself had to give up luxury because of her problems. Putting his hand to his cheek as a sign of sympathy and misunderstanding, the leader was unable to offer anything. He just quietly asked what she wanted then. The girl expresses a desire to be a maid. This has caused widespread surprise, but it is the safest activity. The girl continued to look at her interlocutors, trying to understand why they were dissuading her. They were just worried about her condition, since the work is quite grueling. But the blonde interrupted them, saying that she somehow copes with work in the tavern, although it is much more difficult for her there. Exhaling in despair, the green-haired man only nodded his head in agreement, saying that he believed her. An elderly woman appears before the heroine. A nice, uniform hair tied in a neat ponytail and round glasses. Taking a step forward, she bows her head. The chief says that this is the head maid. The piece of paper was passed into the girl's hands. The gray-haired maid noticed that the blonde was in thought, clearly not understanding what it was, and said that this paper set out the conditions and payment for the work. Still standing next to the sofa, the woman continued her story. Karuna directed her gaze somewhere to the side while the conversation turned to payment. Bowing her head, the lady began to whisper something in the young lady's ear. The girl's eyes began to slowly widen. Shock slowly appears on the girl's face. She didn't expect to hear what she had just been told. Her eyes widening, the girl stared at the Duke. It seemed that he was a saint because the amount was 20 times more than she was paid at the inn. This could solve all the problems. Bakeld and the headmaid looked at each other silently. The reaction was truly funny and put everyone present into a slight stupor. The beauty silently continues to run her eyes over the agreement. The reasons for the refusal immediately disappeared somewhere because the conditions were so good that it would be stupid to refuse. Coughing into his hand before informing everyone of his decision, Karuna agrees to the job. Everything really suits her. The young man points his hand to the place of signature. Nothing else is required, just one stroke of the hand, and it is accepted. Grabbing an ink pen in her hand, the girl suddenly decides that it is safer to write with her left hand. This will help hide her real handwriting. The agreement passes into the hands of Ra'an. He should certify everything because he is the owner and hires people. There is slight confusion in his eyes. A second later, the leaf falls onto the table like a feather. The signature is correct, which means that Karuna has been hired. The frowning heroine does not understand why Bakeld takes everything that is happening so seriously. He really should relax because he is not looking for a betrothed, but just hiring an ordinary worker. The head maid called the girl to follow her. She is now an official employee of the castle and should undergo training. The girl quickly agrees and gets up from her favorite place. The greenhead wanted to ask what happened, but looking at the Duke, he remembers something. He has an appointment with one of his friends for today. The young man continues his chatter, trying to reach his friend, but he seemed not to hear him at all. The only thought in his head is about the strange girl. Putting his hand to his chin in thought, the guy tries to put all the pieces of the puzzle together. The girl is a commoner, but then how can she read? Handprint. This is always a sign that you are signing an agreement with a person not from high society. They don't know how to write, so they use this life hack. Thoughts move towards Karuna. She wrote her name herself, thereby stunning the man. It's almost unreal. The girl wrote with her left hand for some reason, trying to hide something. Perhaps she didn't want to show her real handwriting, but then what was the point? The beauty is really very sweet and looks very young. But comparing the facts, the Duke was not sure of anything. She didn't look like a 12-year-old girl. The thought process was interrupted. Bakeld talks about how glad he is that this girl is not his betrothed. This was the only positive. The excitement didn't stop. There were no odors coming from the hair, as well as from the heroine herself in general. Many things did not add up and did not look like reality. How similar she was. It seemed to the man that he found more similarities between the girl and another person. This woman was none other than Knighthood fan Macarena. Karuna sits on the floor, dressed in a maid uniform deep in thought. An unexpected greeting is heard from the side. Two cute girls who, judging by their appearance, also work here, are already squatting in front of her in a split second, starting their questioning. They wondered where she was from. Making a grimace of pain, the villainess talks about how painful it is for her to even remember this. There was some truth in this after everything that happened with Count Macarena. Making a grimace of pain, the villainess talks about how painful it is for her to even remember this. There was some truth in this after everything that happened with Count Macarena. The pink-haired woman quickly hugs the main character. Outrage about why they are all pestering the girl continues to flow in a stream of words. She had just forgotten all the horror that she had to endure. Karuna, who tried to free herself from the iron grip, failed. The unknown person hugged her even tighter. According to the lady, she should have finished all the sweets that she did not have time to finish. An unknown girl appeared right before the eyes of the main character. The blonde was interested in something, trying to tell how the master felt better. The most unpleasant thing is when a person is pulled on the cheeks without his permission. Screaming and calling the heroine a savior, that's exactly what the lady did. Finally left without unnecessary attention, the girl only rubs her cheeks red from the touch with her palms. She hears a conversation about the Duke and a prominent lady who invited the guy to dinner. The maid continues her story, remembering the day when one of the tea ceremonies took place. Even then, the green-headed boy suggested that Betrothed felt better because his betrothed appeared there. The Duke himself was as excited as ever. It seemed that his whole body was electrified, and this was noticeable to absolutely everyone. Rumors spread on their own. Some people had already married them in their heads a long time ago, and the couple really looked quite cute. Everyone was talking about the fact that the Duke had finally reduced his coldness towards women and was starting to look for a wife. Without really thinking about what is happening, Karuna, as if nothing had happened, brings the cookie to her mouth. Betrothed is not cold, but it seems like he is. The two maids continue their conversation. More words about the young man fly past my ears. It is said that this time he went to the Lady Lurinths of the Viscount's family. Memories came flooding back. The main character knew this girl very well, even when she was Klein. It seemed that the girl always wanted to lure Ran. Embarrassment and disgust always covered the girl after all the words of her interlocutor. She will not calm down, continuing to hope that she will be able to break the ice and take the guy for herself. The cookie melts in the girl's mouth as she is brought back to reality. The only interesting news is that the couple will be having tea at the castle today. Rising from her knees and shaking off the crumbs, the girl decided it was time to get to work. Apologizing for leaving early, she quickly moves away. Karuna opens the oak door that leads to the courtyard. A new batch of wine is due to be delivered today, and she should accept it. The beautiful chambers of the castle sparkle in the sun. You can admire them forever, but the girl is interested in completely different things. The road is empty without any sign of a carriage. Turning her head, the main character notices barrels of wine lined up in a neat stack. This is what she needed. A picture of that very wolf, who as it turned out was the Duke, reluctantly pops up in my head. At first, it was thought that he simply disappeared, but it turned out to be the opposite. The head of the maids is standing right in front of the girl. The young lady did not immediately notice the elderly woman, and therefore was a little taken aback. Before you have time to ask anything, screams come from somewhere. Mr. Ron returns, and that is why everyone is ordered to get out of the way. One of the Forest clan riding a horse continues to shout. The woman at the tea party nevertheless slipped something into the young man's tea, and now he is in the carriage in the most terrible condition. Some servants express their dissatisfaction with the situation. Everyone is afraid that the man will start having seizures again, but it's good that he is already here, which means he will get help. Realization comes to the heroine's little head. She knows who the Duke had tea with, and that's why she's shocked. Lady Lurintoff could not cope with her task. This was her goal, but the girl couldn't believe that someone could do this even without doing everything in the best possible way. The only sane thought was about a love potion. The girl thought that maybe Betrothed just drank a love potion, and because of that, everything happened. The love potion is popular among many noblewomen. It cannot be purchased, but sometimes it becomes available. You just need to add a few drops for the effect you want. It doesn't matter where you put the potion because it will still work. Having tasted a love potion, a person will immediately fall in love with you. The result is always extremely comforting. Knowing this lady, she could definitely do something like that. Her love was more like an obsession. Exhaling air in frustration, Karuna silently noticed how naive Ron was. It was not clear how anyone could buy this. Already hastily heading to the castle, the girl still could not understand how this happened. It is not necessary to drink everything that is given, even in a foreign place. More and more strange thoughts swarmed in my head. The young lady noticed something on the floor out of the corner of her eye. Taking the wooden handle, the heroine decided to pick up an incomprehensible object. Even without holding it, you could tell how hard it would be. Now the girl looked more like a little warrior. In his hands was nothing more than an axe. Self-defense was paramount. At this time, the carriage was already on the threshold. It was necessary to be careful not to accidentally run over a person. Mr. Ron has finally arrived. The carriage door opened slowly. Everyone knows who is there, but what condition he was in. The Duke was clearly angry. A grimace distorted the young man's face, instilling fear in everyone around him. The fist hit the door, thereby opening it. The pupils have shrunk. It did no good to those around him or to Betrothed himself. My mind was clouded, and it was noticeable to absolutely everyone. Leaning his hand on the inside of the handle, the young man grabbed his head, making inhuman sounds. He clearly needed help. It was clear that he was suffering. One of the descendants of the Forest clan instantly finds himself next to his friend. Trying to calm the man down, he cannot understand what happened, but it seems that everything is only getting worse. All requests were rejected. It seemed that he had almost lost his hearing. Ron didn't want to go to his chambers or do anything else. The interlocutor gets rudely punched in the face. His pleas were clearly not heard, and that is why the confusion is overwhelming. Without expecting it, the young man flies several meters to the side. The wolf's power begins to manifest itself, which is why this happened. A slight grin and veins in his neck are what characterizes Betrothed at the moment. Red eyes are full of anger and contempt. Duke turned head and noticed, stacked with barrels. Directly for them stood home the heroine who fell. V panicked like only this happened. Cold horror is all that is felt at this moment. She was discovered, and it's very, very bad. The shelter was not reliable enough. The young man slowly turns his head to the side. With slow steps, he begins to move towards that very place. Grasping the handle of the axe more tightly, the heroine mentally thinks about the consequences of his attack if he still intends to harm her. My hands are almost no longer able to hold weapons. She has no choice, but there will most likely be marks on her hands. The squeaking of shoes suggests that the Duke is already very close to her. The thought of attacking first no longer seems so crazy. The militantly raised top 0R indicates complete determination on the girl's part. She realized that this was the only way out in this situation. This has already happened once the ropes are cut and the barrels fall rapidly one after another, as if in slow motion. The Duke, his eyes widening, understood perfectly well what awaited him now. The barrels were visible in his small pupils. Approaching closer and closer, it seemed that the object would literally kill the young man upon impact. This was not at all what he wanted. Someone's hand sticks out from under the barrels. Standing just tens of centimeters away, the girl does not dare to move. She began to realize what had happened. Smiling victoriously, Karuna easily positioned the axe on her shoulder. Her joy knew no bounds. Ron got what he deserved. The young man was pulled out from under the rubble. The two members of the Forest clan carefully placed the Duke's arms over their shoulders. He looked clearly worse for wear, but he still had the strength to scream. The castle shook from women's screams and squeals. The voice is familiar, and again the screams announced their refusal. Karuna was all wrinkled. Fatigue rolled in from all sides. Screaming takes a lot of energy, and this is not always good, but the person had no choice. The headmaid closes her eyes, ignoring the girl's words. Her main argument is that the young lady will be paid more. The weekly payment indeed promised to be twice as much as it is now. A fake smile spread across the girl's face. Of course she agreed to do anything for money. Making a disappointed grimace, Karuna, with disappointment in her voice, says that apparently this is what they expected to hear from her. But this is not true. Ron and the maid silently look at their interlocutor. She just continues to scream that she doesn't want to and can't do this, gesticulating wildly with her hands. The girl is only 12 years old, and therefore she cannot work for this person. Not with him, this simply won't happen. Stretching her finger forward, trying to point in the man's direction, she frowns even more. The Duke only shrugs his shoulders in response, saying that he never laid a finger on her. Bending down to be the same height as the girl, he continued to discuss what was happening. No one attracted him, but even if there were not a single woman left, the young man still would not even look in the direction of the maid. For the beauty, this was not a clear indicator. He already has thoughts about it, and that tells her something. Ron, in a state of anger, pulled aside. The head maid stands there, making no sign of it so as not to interrupt their interesting conversation. The argument continues, and insults towards the man are already beginning. Tired of this altercation, the elderly woman attempts to stop the couple. The answer turns out to be quite angry. They both just scream something different. Karuna says that she does not agree, and Ron says that she must agree. Walking down the corridor, the girl notices how everyone is looking at her strangely. Even since her childhood, she had never experienced such attention to her person. Unpleasant sensations envelop the heroine. Why is this all happening to her? Literally running down the stairs, the question that had been tormenting the girl for a long time escaped her lips. The maids just look at each other and are surprised how she doesn't already know about what's happening. The eyes instantly shrink, becoming like small grains. It turns out that among the knights, they now call her nothing other than Rana Bakeld. This is simply ridiculous. The interlocutors smile sweetly in response, continuing their story. The Duke decided to give her a knighthood after the girl managed to stop him twice. Standing frozen as if rooted to the spot, Karuna does not understand what is happening. Someone from the Forest clan should tell everyone more about this later. You just have to think about the leader, and he is already here. Like a puppy, he begs the girl that she should think about becoming a knight. It won't be difficult, but it will be great for her career. Turning her head away, Karuna tries to stand her ground. She doesn't want to, and she can't. This is her favorite and real answer. The girl is about to leave Greenhead, however does not want to leave her alone. There is some truth in his words. Being a knight would indeed be much easier and more interesting than being a maid. The answer remains the same. The young lady continues to throw out refusals. The young man is already in despair. It is completely unclear to him what arguments to use. When you look down, it's hard not to think about all your decisions. Becoming a knight would be much better, but she would still have to refuse until they cut her off. The girl was sure that she could handle it, but she really couldn't agree. It's a shame, that's all. Ready to kneel, the man wanted to say something else, but rudely interrupting him with the fact that she should go, Karuna quickly leaves. It will be better this way. The yard looks clearly different. There are not many differences, but one, and the most important of them is the means of protection in the form of a weapon hung almost everywhere possible. Axes are now part of palace life. There are really very, very many of them. It's difficult to calculate. All this miracle looks out the window directly at the Duke. The young man is confused and horrified as to what this is. Meanwhile, a native of the Forest clan actively moves behind him, talking about security and how much it cost him to place all this. Irritation had reached its limit, and now it seemed to be pouring over the edge of a well. The man ordered everything to be removed. He clearly didn't like everything that was happening. Not having time to find the correct answer, the main maid comes to the defense of the immigrant. The arguments are true. The beauty of the facade is not so important for recovery. The Duke started his remark to say something and try to resist, but something caught his attention. The head reluctantly turned towards the window. The interlocutors froze silently, only exchanging glances at each other. Bakald talked aloud about Karuna. A smile stretched across his lips and lit up his entire face. He was clearly up to something, and no one could predict what exactly it was. Narrowing his eyes and folding his arms over his chest, Ron thought only about how long the girl would last in the estate. According to his calculations, it won't last long. The small figure is heading somewhere. The girl does not even suspect that at this very moment she is being watched. The next day promised to be difficult. Early in the morning, one of the maids approaches the girl and congratulates her on her acquired title. Not knowing what to say, the lady only manages to mumble something like gratitude in response. Slowly walking along the corridor, the beauty carries a basin of water. She doesn't want to believe everything that's happening, but she hopes that at least caring for the elite will be easier. People are indeed very kind, and perhaps this is all because most of them were raised in the Forest clan. It's a difficult question, but you have to interrupt your thoughts by standing right in front of the door to the Duke's chambers. Opening the door, Karuna enters without knocking. apologizing before doing so. Now these are her direct responsibilities. Approaching the nightstand, the girl notices the guy still lying on the bed. It seems that he has not woken up yet and is having his 10th dream. Attempts to wake Bakel do not end well. The girl pulls the edge of the blanket saying something, but only much louder. Nothing happens and it's quite confusing. Losing her patience, Karuna pulls the blanket so that it flies off the bed. This was one of the surest ways to wake a person. Shock is clearly reflected on the heroine's face. The pink tint goes from the cheeks to the ears. An amazing thing, but she definitely didn't expect to see this. Screams escape her mouth. She really did not expect to see such a strange sight. The feeling was so lousy that it's difficult to put into words. The guy slept in only a shirt. Snoring peacefully, he had no idea that right now he was being stared at in surprise. Karuna could only continue her indignation about his appearance. Having pressed her hands with the sheet to herself, the girl is still confused. She became his personal maid. But what should she do now? If the man continues to walk like this, then she will definitely not be well. She is obliged to work with him, but this has not yet been given the opportunity. The guy was hot, and it really doesn't help. If he's going to continue like this, the girl simply won't have the strength to fight him. But now she had one way, and it was for this that she went to the basin. Icy water poured over the young man like a waterfall in 1 second. Screams filled the entire room and beyond. Sitting on the bed with an angry expression on his face, the gentleman did not understand what had just happened. Someone unceremoniously doused him with a basin, thereby waking him up. The hand went up to his chin, trying to wipe away all the moisture that had accumulated on Ron. It seemed that he was ready to incinerate everyone around him with his stern gaze. The little girl held the iron thing militantly in self-defense. The small eyes showed no fear. The title of Duke should have said something, but the heroine, it would seem, did not care at all. She did not answer the question posed, but the time had come. Somehow, the girl always had good arguments. According to her, the task was to wake up Ron, and she accomplished this in the best possible way. Carefully placing the basin back on the nightstand, Karuna teases the gentleman, saying that if he has any complaints, he should change the maid. With her nose turned up, the girl folds her arms over her chest in a triumphant gesture, knowing for sure that she will not be trampled upon. How did she have the conscience to pull this off? Straightening his hair, the young man only asked if the young lady was really not afraid of him. It was hard to believe that this was true, but it was true. The answer was ridicule. With her hands on her hips, the main character grinned and didn't understand what she should be afraid of. Already quite annoyed, the native almost shouted that he was not a seducer and that all this was nonsense. There was no reason at all to talk about him like that. The girl looked away. He definitely should have looked at his appearance and only then drawn conclusions. She pointed this out to him almost with her finger. Surprise appeared on the young man's face. It seemed as if my eyes were almost popping out of my head for no reason. He definitely should have changed his clothes, which he found out thanks to the girl. The young man silently straightens his scarlet tie. The face does not convey any emotion, but the incident is still in his head without any movement. Karuna looks somewhere to the side, but the young duke cannot help but attract attention. She notices how he looks at the girl, and many questions arise in her mind. Confusion is all. Bekel doesn't understand how she can be so young. Obviously something doesn't add up here, but instead of sorting things out, the guy just suggests going to the dining room. A beautifully decorated table filled with a bunch of dishes seems to beckon you to try each of them. The head maid bows her head and invites Ron. Already on the way to the elderly lady, the girl notices that the table is really full of drugs, which is even surprising. The Duke is standing near the table. It seemed that he was about to start breakfast, but the guy stood silently for a minute. He dines alone. Then why is there so much food here? The head slowly bows. The thoughts are long over. Something is about to happen right now. The next second, Ron is already standing on the table. It was as if my eyes were trying to pop out of my head from this. Why did he behave this way out of the blue? The young man is in obvious inhuman anger. Food enters his mouth using his hands. The cutlery is forgotten, and so he simply eats this way. Tomorrow continued. The elderly woman does not pay any attention to everything that is happening. She just smiles sweetly. Karuna, in turn, is still in terrible shock. Awareness comes naturally. He never eats anything at banquets, and it seems that now the girl has found a logical explanation for this. The man would scare away everyone around him. Having lost consciousness, the girl tries to distract herself from the spectacle at least for a second, turning to the person standing next to her. Saying how good it is that this all remains a secret, she tries to remain calm. The young man had already finished his breakfast. It was clear from him that everything was very tasty, even though he behaved in such a way. Licking his fingers, the guy continued to look somewhere to the side. The girl felt bad from this. Closing her eyes, she continues to wonder how she witnessed such an incident. Horror shows on her face. How can a person in the prime of his life behave like this? This is very strange and at least unpleasant. This is not the first time that Ron has behaved inappropriately. Every time before going to bed, going into his room, the young lady sees him lighting candles and then staying awake because of them. An important meeting is scheduled. Nothing will help the Duke even if you will sleep until noon, even if you use all possible methods. Betrothed is a war hero, a bloody knight, the head of the imperial nobles. Always so calculating and cold, but it turned out to be quite the opposite. Home heroine. Sometimes it seems that he simply not V to yourself. Tom confirmation and the fact that the guy peels fruit with a sword. A warlike fire lights up in the girl's heart. She promises herself that she won't leave it all that easily. She is obliged to make him a normal person and not compromise on any principles. It's early morning. The sun is shining brightly, calling everyone around to wake up and enjoy the weather. Screams dilute all this beauty. Wearing only his pants, the young man runs headlong away from the girl running behind him. The screams belong to him. The girl is holding a shirt in her hands. The goal has already been set, and she does not intend to retreat. Managing to turn his head as he walks, the Duke only continues to scream. He wants the hated heroine to finally unhook from him and disappear from sight. The young lady is not even going to stop halfway. She wants the man to put on his shirt. It's not difficult, but he'll have to do it. The only argument for not wearing clothes is that the young man's back will burn again. It's a joke, but the person running behind says that she sprinkled pepper powder on his clothes. The answer is more screams. People from the castle begin to appear on the way. Everyone is busy with their own business, but seeing this picture, everyone begins to slowly move away in different directions. Asking for help doesn't work. One of the servants just grins, while one of the maids smiles and invites Karuna to come over for tea with the cookies she has prepared. It seemed that everyone was striving to do something good, but not for Ron, but for the girl. A minute of silence and a grimace of understanding appears on the young man's face. He says something after them, mentally hating them. The leader of the Forest clan passing by the window smiles when he sees this picture. It's hard not to find the silver lining in what's going on, and that's why he's doing it. The maid standing nearby only confirms how cute this sight is. It's hard to hide the smiles because both are sincerely happy. Taking a mug of tea in his hands, the green-headed man agrees, talking about the absence of his attacks. There was some truth in this because indeed, with the advent of the girl, the attacks subsided. On the street, the girl had almost caught up with the man still trying to throw a shirt on him. The condition was getting better day by day, and this boded a lot of good things. The old lady continued to smile, saying thank you to the girl. Everything was clear enough in her thoughts. Everything was thanks to this child. Taking a slight break from drinking tea, the native opens his eyes to return to observing the two persons on the street. Various remarks still continue to be heard. Thoughts drift to Karuna. A sweet girl, she is always ready to help, and everyone can envy her stubbornness. She is not the Duke's natural daughter, but remembering how the Forest clan presented her, anything is possible. At least she deserves it like no one else. Something metal appears before my eyes. Surprise appears on the green-haired man's face. Now he could not observe everything that was happening, and this worried him. He looked up and noticed Lady Lime. The metal object was nothing more than a tray. The old lady silently held him, while the man says that he did not expect this from her. Serious facial features make it clear that the woman is speaking quite seriously. She believes that the child belongs to the master, and that is why the leader should not stare like that without any reason. A nervous smile spreads across the guy's face. He wasn't staring at the girl at all. He didn't even have this in his thoughts, but it seems that then he was too immersed in his thoughts that he forgot any rules of etiquette. He never even said his name. Karuna, waving her arms wildly, yelled at the Duke. She didn't run anywhere else, but it seemed like the situation was only getting worse. He acted like a child, and it was inappropriate. With her hands on her hips, the girl just continued to complain. It seemed that the Duke really liked to mock the poor maid, and that is why he does this to her. There was no normal answer, but Ra'an, lying on a tree branch, rejoiced audibly at the fact that he finally did not see the face of his interlocutor. He didn't care at all about everything that was happening. The lady was not going to give up just like that. Persuasion and threats almost worked, but she was far below, and therefore there was no point. Betrothed was supposed to meet a noble lady today, but he vehemently refused the shirt. The guy really acted like a little kid. Agreement was not long in coming, but he directly refused the clothes that Karuna chose. She is his servant, and he was obliged to agree with her choice, but so far everything was quite the opposite. An interesting thought came into the girl's head. She could still climb up to him if he didn't want to come down. All that remains is to carry out this action. The impudent expression on his face made it clear that all the words were perceived as a joke. Ran did not believe that she would climb the tree, so he openly mocked the young woman. Now he is the king of the situation and can say whatever he wants. The gardener moved the ladder. The Duke's screams echoed throughout the garden again, because how dare a man do such a thing? The mustache is still a gentleman, so he had no obstacles in helping the girl climb. Not even a few seconds have passed before the young hero sees the face of the hated servant right in front of his nose. Leaves fell on her head, but she, without even trying to shake them off, just looks at the young man angrily. The shirt flies into the young man's face. He really should wear it if he doesn't want to get himself into trouble. The face is distorted due to an unexpected event. Waving the thing, the girl continues to talk about how the man should come down. Her words sound more like an order, which is not surprising. Obviously, the girl has gone too far with the amplitude of the swing, and her legs slide down trying to pull her mistress along with her. She does not have time to fully react due to the speed of her actions. Betrothed rises, sitting on the branches of a tree, realizing that something bad is definitely going to happen. The staircase swaying dangerously hints and warns of a threat. Karuna quickly flies down the ladder, has come off its support, and is heading to the same place. Her face shows only undisguised horror. If a girl falls, she will be in trouble. The anticipation of falling is so close and so far away, there may be a fracture or even several. All the events flash before the girl's eyes, and she wonders why she climbed this tree. The little lady clutches the shirt in her hands as an object of salvation. The fall should have already happened, but then why didn't she fall? Too soft and not painful at all. The cause of the minor incident was identified almost immediately. Opening her eyes, Karuna saw the Duke's face right a meter away from her. He held the girl in his arms, talking about how she scared him. The cause of the minor incident was identified almost immediately. Opening her eyes, Karuna saw the Duke's face right a meter away from her. He held the girl in his arms, talking about how she scared him. The guy continues to ask why she is so light. The girl is given quite a lot of food, so that she has the strength to do everything. But this question remains a mystery. The main character just widened her eyes, understanding the whole situation. Looking down as if the calm before the storm, the girl quietly asks for something. Because of the tone of her voice, Betrothed doesn't immediately understand what she wants. The palm quickly presses into the young man's cheek. The interlocutor is yelling to be released. Perhaps she really doesn't like being in his arms. Actively jerking, the heroine tried to free herself from the iron grip, but so far she had little success. How she would like this to end, but falling is not an option. Feet touch the ground. She was finally released and she is free, which is good news. Freedom has arrived, but the girl accidentally lowers her eyes to her uniform. Due to climbing trees, the entire uniform was now definitely dirty. I should take it to the laundromat. The Duke turns his head towards Karuna. A strange feeling is not going to leave the young man. There is still something interesting and fascinating in this little guy. If only Betrothed had the will, he could do everything to destroy the girl in no time. She was small and fragile, but very fighting. A lot of unacceptable things happened in a month. On the first day, the girl doused him with water from a basin to wake him up early. Everything would have been fine, but after that incident, she repeated this method 1,000,000 more times. His hands were now always bandaged, so the young man's fingers could hardly move, and he had to use utensils, refusing to eat with his hands. A wave of anger washed over Ryan. He didn't understand what the problem was and why the heroine was doing this to him. What does she want? Approaching the blonde, the guy places his hand on top of her small head. There is no answer to the questions about why she is not afraid of him. She has nothing to fear. She is fearless, but she can't miss a moment for a joke. The worst thing in this world is just his table manners. She has nothing to fear. She is fearless, but she can't miss a moment for a joke. The worst thing in this world is just his table manners. Ron looks at her intently, but it seems that he does not see anyone around him. The girl asks to let her go, but everything goes past his ears. Losing yourself in thoughts cannot be avoided. Shrouded in weightless space, the man remembered Lady Klein. He didn't want to believe in anything, but what if his guesses were true, and this girl was sent by his friend? Last night was very important. Incomprehensible envelopes that had no end or edge lay on the table. No one was going to touch the stack of paper. Bacold holds a piece of paper in his hands. It couldn't be said that he was extracting a lot of useful information, but at least a little new appeared in his head. The scroll said that Karuna's parents were missing, and she was found all alone, wandering the streets. Someone clearly wanted to hide the truth because it was all too suspicious. The parents left the young lady immediately after the divorce, or someone forced them. The hand rises on its own, touching the smooth chin. Rayan really wanted to understand this whole situation. One of the first things that interested him was to find out on whose territory the girl had been living all this time. There is a royal aid station in the castle. On the very first day Karuna ended up there. Sitting on the sofa, she had to answer all the questions asked of her. But there was not a single record of this anywhere. However, sometimes these procedures are skipped. On the same day there was an incident, and too many people came forward. All attention was focused on one elderly woman, as a result of which they forgot to interview the young lady. Fury clouds the guy's face. He doesn't understand how people from the help center can be so thoughtless. The crown should still be on his side, but it seems this time is an exception. He was unlucky. The whole kingdom was very lucky that the red-haired lady and Count Macarena were not interested in the assassination attempt on the prince. The lady's character was extremely complex, and therefore she could easily send her man to ruin everyone's life. Thoughts like a flock of wild bees swarmed in the Duke's smart head. His theories could very well be reality, but he did not know how to test it. Suddenly, inspiration seemed to descend on the young man. What if Count Macarena's daughter just wanted to hide someone in his chambers? He had long known that his castle was safe because of the Forest clan, but such an idea had never even occurred to him before. By now, only one thing was clear. Karuna was no ordinary child. She was clearly planning something or preparing for something. Anything was worth waiting for. Some kind of squealing was heard. This is what triggered this reality. The girl screamed about how much pain she was in. It was obvious that, distracted by his thoughts, Ron squeezed her head harder than he should have. Fear gripped the guy. Whatever it was and whoever this girl was, he had no intention of intentionally harming her. Panic showed in the young man's eyes, and the best solution was to hastily loosen his grip. Pulling his hand back, apologies poured towards the girl. The Duke did not like all this. That is why he never considered it necessary to apologize, but here he made a mistake, and he should have admitted it. The pain was incredibly strong. Karuna, with her hands on her head, looks at her interlocutor offendedly. His words do not help her, so she silently turns her head away. Control was lost, which means it was a big mistake. The best solution was to change the topic. Addressing the lady, the man asked her about her relatives. He heard that the girl did not have time to say goodbye to anyone. They really should have walked around the capital. The beauty's face lit up with a joyful light. She had long wanted to go to the city because she missed her aunt and uncle, as well as the friends of their tavern. Not believing my ears, I only had enough strength to ask again if what was said was true. A smile spread across his face. The conditions are quite simple. She could go, but only with an accompanying person. This task was quite doable. Joy overwhelmed the young lady at that very second. Oak doors to the office separated the corridor and the room. 2 pairs of feet walked towards the room, their shoes creaking loudly. The Duke wanted to get rid of the company of this little fellow, at least for a while and for 1 hour before their trip. Ordering Karuna to wait for him at the gate, he disappears into the office, to which the girl nods in agreement.